Psychology Chapter 3. Meeting Life Challenges. Nature, Types and Sources of Stress. While waiting to cross the road on a busy Monday morning, you may have temporary stressed, but because you are alert, vigilant and aware of the danger, you are able to cross the road safely. Faced with any challenge, we put in additional efforts and mobilize all our resources and the support system to meet the challenge. All the challenges, problems, and difficult circumstances put us into stress. Thus, if handled properly, stress increases the probability of one's survival. Stress is like electricity. It gives energy, increases human arousal, and affects performance. However, if the electric current is too high, it can fuse bulbs, damage appliances, etc. High stress, too, can produce unpleasant effects and cause our performance to deteriorate. Conversely, too little stress may cause one to feel somewhat lightless and low on motivation, which may lead us to perform slowly and less efficiently. It is important to remember that not all stress is inherently bad or destructive. EU stress is term used to describe the level of stress that is good for you and one at which a person behaves at his best performance. EU stress, however, has the potential of turning into distress. It is this latter manifestation of stress that causes our bodies wear and tear. Thus, stress can be described as the pattern of responses an organism makes to stimulus event that disturbs the equilibrium and exceeds a person's ability to cope. Nature of stress. The word stress has its origin in the Latin word strictus, meaning tight or narrow, or stringer, the verb meaning to tighten. These root words reflect the internal feelings of tightness and constriction of the muscles and breathing reported by many people under stress. Stress is often explained in terms of characteristics of the environment that are disruptive to the individual. Stressors are events that cause our body to give the stress response. Such events include noise, crowding, a bad relationship, or the daily commuting to school and office. The reaction to external stressors is called strain. Stress has come to be associated with both the causes as well as effects. However, this view of stress can cause confusion. Hans Selye, the father of modern stress research, defined stress as the non-specific response of the body to an demand. That is, regardless of the cause of the threat, the individual will respond with the same physiological pattern of reactions. Many researchers do not agree with this definition as they feel that stress response is not nearly as general as non-specific as Selye suggests. Different stressors may produce somewhat different patterns of stress reaction, and different individuals may have different characteristic modes of response. You may recall the case of an opening batsman mentioned earlier. Each one of us will see the situation through our own eyes, and it is our perception of demands and our ability to meet them which will determine whether we are feeling stressed or not. Stress is not a factor that resides in the individual or the environment. Instead, it is embedded in an ongoing process that involves individuals' transactions with their social and cultural environments, making attempts to cope with the issues that arise. Stress is a dynamic mental/cognitive state. It is a disruption of homeostasis or an imbalance that gives rise to a requirement for resolution of that. The perception of stress is dependent upon the individual's cognitive appraisal of events and the resources available to deal with them. The stress process based on cognitive theory of stress was propounded by Lazarus and his colleagues. Primary appraisal refers to the perception of a new or changing environment as positive, neutral, or negative, in its consequences. Negative events are appraised for their possible harm, threat, or challenge. Harm is the assessment of the damage that has already been done by an event. Threat is the assessment of possible future damage that may be brought about by the event. Challenge appraisals are associated with more confident expectations of the ability to cope with the stressful event, the potential to overcome and even profit from the event is by releasing stress. When we perceive an event as stressful, we are likely to make a secondary appraisal, which is the assessment of one's coping abilities and resources and whether they will be sufficient to meet the harm, threat, or challenge of the event. These resources may be mental, physical, personal, or social. If one thinks that one has a positive attitude, health, skills, and social support to deal with the crisis of his or her, she or she will feel less stressed. This two-level appraisal process determines not only our cognitive and behavioral responses but also our emotional and physiological responses to the external events. These appraisals are very subjective and will depend on many factors. One factor is the past experience of dealing with such a stressful condition. If one has handled a similar stressful condition very successfully in the past, they would be less threatening for him or her. Another factor is whether the stressful event is perceived as controllable, whether one has a mastery or control over a situation. A person who believes that he or she can control the onset of a negative situation or its adverse consequences will experience less amount of stress than those who have no such sense of personal control. For example, a sense of self-confidence or efficacy can determine whether the person is likely to appraise the situation as a threat or as a challenge. Thus, the experience and outcome of a stressor may vary from individual to individual. Stress includes all those environmental and personal events which challenge or threaten the well-being of a person. These stressors can be external, such as environmental, social, or psychological, based on the individual. Very often, these stressors result in a variety of stress reactions which may be psychological, behavioral, physiological, emotional, and cognitive. At the physiological level, arousal plays a key role in stress-related behavior. The hypothalamus initiates action along two pathways. The first pathway involves the autonomic nervous system. The adrenal gland releases large amount of catecholamines, that is two types of enzymes, into the bloodstream. This leads to physiological changes seen in flight or fight response. The second pathway involves the pituitary gland, which secretes the corticosteroid or cortisol, which provides energy. The emotional reactions to experience of stress include negative emotions such as fear, anxiety, embarrassment, anger, depression, or even denial. The behavioral responses are virtually limitless depending on the nature of a stressful event. Confrontative action against the stressor or withdrawal from the threatening event are two general categories of behavioral responses. Cognitive responses include beliefs and about the harm or threat of an event that it poses and beliefs about its causes or controllability. These include responses such as inability to concentrate and intrusive, repetitive, or morbid thoughts. Intrusive, repetitive, or morbid thoughts. The stresses which people experience also vary in terms of intensity, duration, complexity, and predictability. The outcome of a stress depends on the position of a particular stressful experience along these dimensions. Usually, more intense, prolonged, or chronic, complex, and unanticipated stress have more negative consequences than they have less intense, short term, less complex, and expected stresses. Psychological characteristics like mental health, temperament, and self concept are relevant to the experience of the stress. The cultural context in which we live determines the meaning of any event and defines the nature of response that is expected under various conditions. Finally, the stress experience will be determined by the resources of a person, such as money, social skills, coping style, support networks, etc. All these factors determine the appraisal of a given stressful situation. Signs and symptoms of stress. The way we respond to stress varies depending upon our personality, early bringing, and life experiences. Everyone has their own pattern of stress response. So, the warning signs may vary as their intensity, but each of us will behave differently. Some of us know our patterns of stress and can gauge the depth of the problem by the nature and severity of our own symptoms or changes in behavior. These symptoms of stress can be physical, emotional, and behavioral. Any of the symptoms can indicate a degree of stress which, if left unresolved, might have serious problems. Types of stresses. The three major types of stress are physical, environmental, and psychological. Physical and environmental stress. Physical stresses are demands that change the state of our body. We find strained when we overexert ourselves physically, lack of nutrition diet, suffer an injury, or fail to get enough sleep. Environmental stresses are aspects of our surroundings that are often unavoidable, such as air pollution, crowding, noise, heat of summer, winter cold, etc. Another group of environmental stresses are catastrophic events or disasters such as fire, earthquake, flood, etc. Psychological stress. These stresses that we generate are in our mind. These are personal and unique to the person experiencing them and are internal sources of stress. We worry about problems, feel anxiety, or become depressed. These are not only symptoms of stress, but they cause further stress for us. Some of the important sources of psychological stress are frustration, conflicts, internal and social pressure, etc. Frustration results from the blocking of needs and motives by something or someone that hinders us from achieving a desired goal. There could be a number of causes of frustration, such as social discrimination, interpersonal hurt, low grades in school, etc. Conflicts may occur between two or more incompatible needs or motives. Example, whether to study, dance, or psychology. You may want to continue studies or take up a job. There may be conflict of values when you are pressurized or taken any action that may be against the values held by you. Internal pressures stem from beliefs based upon expectations from inside to ourselves, such as I must do everything perfectly. Such expectations can only lead to disappointment. Many of us drive ourselves ruthlessly towards achieving unrealistic high standards in achieving our goals. Social pressures may be brought about from people who make excessive demands on us. This can cause even greater pressure when we have to work with them. Also, there are people with whom we face interpersonal difficulties, a personality clash of sorts. Social stress. These are induced externally and result from our interaction with people. Social events like death or illness in a family, strained relationships, trouble with neighbors are some examples of social stresses. These social stresses vary widely from person to person. Attending parties may be stressful for a person who likes it to spend quiet evenings at home, while an outgoing person may find staying home in the evening stressful. Sources of stress. A wide range of events and conditions can generate stress. Among the most important of these are major stressful life events such as death of a loved one or personal injury, the annoying frequent hassles of everyday life, and traumatic events that affect our lives. Life events. Changes, big both and small, sudden and gradual, affect our life from the moment we are born. We learn to cope with small everyday changes, but major changes in life can be stressful because they disturb our routine and cause upheaval. If several of these life events that are planned, example moving into a new house, or unpredicted like breakup from a long-term relationship occur within a short period of time, we find it difficult to cope with them and will be more prone to the symptoms of stress. Hassles. These are personal stresses we endure as individuals due to the happenings in our daily life, such as noisy surroundings, commuting, quarrelsome neighbors, electricity, and water shortage. Attending to various emergencies are daily hassles experienced by a housewife. There are some jobs in which daily hassles are very frequent. These hassles may sometimes have devastating consequences for the individual who is often the one coping alone with them, as others may not even be aware of them as outsiders. The more stress people report as a result of daily hassles, the poorer their psychological well being. Traumatic events. These include being involved in a variety of extreme events such as fire, train or road accident, robbery, earthquake, tsunami, etc. The effects of these events may occur after some lapse of time and sometimes persist as symptoms of anxiety, flashbacks, dreams, and intrusive thoughts. Severe trauma can also strain relationships. Professional help will be needed to cope with them, especially if they persist over a long time. Effects of stress on psychological functioning and health. What are effects of stress? Many of the effects are psychological in nature. However, other changes also occur inside stressed individuals. There are four major effects of stress associated with the stress state: emotional, psychological, cognitive, and behavioral. Emotional effect. Those who suffer from stress are far more likely to experience mood swings and show erratic behavior that may alienate them from family and friends. In other cases, this they can start a vicious cycle of diseased confidence leading to more serious emotional problems. Such examples of feelings, anxiety, increased physical tension cause examination anxiety. Physiological effects. When the human body is placed under physical or psychological stress, it increases the production of certain hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones produced marked changes in heart rate, blood pressure levels, metabolism, and physical activity. Although this physical reaction will help us to function more effectively when we are under pressure for short periods of time, it can be extremely damaging for the body in long-term effects. Examples of physiological effects are release of amphetamine and norepinephrine, slowing down of the digestive system, expansion of air passages in lungs, increased heart rate, and constriction of blood vessels. Cognitive effects. If pressures due to stress continue, one may suffer from mental overload. This suffering from high level of stress can rapidly cause individuals to lose their ability to make sound decisions. Faulty decisions made at home, in career, or at workplace may lead to arguments, failure, financial loss, or even loss of job. Cognitive effects of stress are poor concentration and reduced short term memory capacity. Behavioral effects. Stress affects our behavior in the form of eating less nutritious food, increasing intake of stimulants such as caffeine, excessive consumption of cigarettes, alcohol, and other drugs such as tranquilizers, etc. Tranquilizers can be addictive and have side effects such as loss of concentration, poor coordination, and dizziness. Some of the typical behavioral effects of stress seen are disrupted sleep patterns, increased absenteeism, and reduced work performance. Stress and health. You must have often observed that many of your friends fall sick during examination time. They suffer from stomach upsets, body aches, nausea, diarrhea, and fever, etc. You must have also noticed that people who are unhappy in their personal lives fall sick more often than those who are happy. Chronic daily disease can divert individuals' attention from career and caring for himself or herself. When stress is prolonged, it affects physical health and impairs psychological functioning. People experience exhaustion and attitudinal problems, attitudinal problems when the stress due to demands from the environment, and the physical exhaustion is seen in the signs of chronic fatigue, weakness, and low energy. The mental exhaustion appears in the form of irritability, anxiety, feelings of helplessness, and hopelessness. This state of physical and emotional psychological exhaustion is known as burnout. There is also convincing evidence to show that stress can produce changes in the immune system and increase the chances of someone becoming ill. Stress has been implicated in the development of cardiovascular disorders, high blood pressure, as well as psychosomatic disorders including ulcers, asthma, allergies, and headaches. Researchers estimate that stress plays an important role in 50 to 70% of all physical illnesses. Studies also reveal that 60% of mental visits are primarily for stress related symptoms. General adaptation syndrome. There are basically four steps of this stage. 1. Alarm reaction stage. The presence of notorious stimulus or stressor leads to activation of adrenaline pituitary cortex system. This triggers the release of hormones, producing the stress response. Now the individual is ready to fight or flight. Resistance stage. If stress is prolonged, the stress stage begins. The parasympathetic nervous system calls for more cautious use of body's resources. The organism makes efforts to cope with threat as through confrontation. Exhaustion stage. Continued exposure to the same stressor or additional stressors drain the body of its resources and leads to the third stage of exhaustion. The psychological system involved in alarm reaction and resistance becomes ineffective, and susceptibility to stress related diseases such as high blood pressure becomes more likely. Stress and the immune system. Stress can cause illness by impairing the workings of the immune system. The immune system guards the body against attackers both from within and outside. Psychochrony immunology focuses on links between the mind, the brain, and the immune system. It studies the effects of stress on the immune system. How does the immune system work? The white blood cells within the immune system identify and destroy foreign bodies such as viruses. It also leads to production of antibodies. There are several kinds of white blood cells or leukocytes within the immune system called including T cells, B cells, and natural killer cells. T cells destroy invaders, T helpers cells increase immunological activity. It is these T helper cells that are attacked by the human immunodeficiency virus HIV, the virus causing AIDS. B cells produce antibodies. Natural killer cells are involved in fight against both viruses and tumors. Stress can affect natural killer cells, which is of major importance in defense against various infections and cancer. Reduced level of natural killer can have adverse effects, including high stress, and also students facing important examinations are faced with such stress. Studies reveal that immune system functioning is better in individuals receiving social support. Also, changes in the immune system will have more effect on health among those immune system are already weakened. Lifestyle. Stress can lead to unhealthy lifestyle or health damaging behavior. Lifestyle is the overall pattern of decisions and behaviors that determine a person's health and quality of life. Stressed individuals may more likely to expose themselves to pathogens, which are agents causing physical illness. People who are stressed have poor nutritional habits, sleep less, and are likely to engage in other health risking behaviors like smoking and alcohol abuse. Such health impairing behaviors develop gradually and are accompanied by pleasant experiences temporarily. However, we tend to ignore their long term damaging effects and underestimate the risk they pose to our lives. Studies have revealed that health promoting behavior like balanced diet, regular exercise, family support, etc., play an important role in good health. Adhering to a lifestyle that includes balanced low fat diet, regular exercise, and continued activity along with positive thinking enhances health and longevity. The modern lifestyle of excessive eating, drinking, and the so called fast paced good life has led to violation of basic principles of health in some of us as to what we eat, think, or do with our lives. Coping with stress. In recent years, the conviction has grown that it is how we cope with stress and now how stress one experiences that influences our psychological well being, social functioning, and health. Coping is a dynamic situation specific reaction to stress. It is a set of concrete responses to a stressful situation or events that are intended to resolve the problem and reduce stress. The way we cope with stress often depends on rigid, deep seated beliefs based on experience. To manage stress, we often need to reassess the way we think and learn coping strategies to cope with stress. People who cope poorly with stress have an impaired immune response and diminished activity of natural killer cells. Individuals show consistent individual differences in the coping strategies they use to handle stressful situations. These include both overt and covert activities. There are three coping strategies given by Endler and Parker. Task oriented strategy. This involves obtaining information about the stressful situation and about alternative courses of action and their probable outcome. It involves deciding priorities and acting so as to deal directly with the stressful situation. For example, schedule my time better or think about how I have solved my similar problems. Emotion oriented strategy. This can involve efforts to maintain hope and to control one's emotions. It can also involve venting feelings of anger and frustration or deciding that nothing can be done to change things. For example, tell myself that it is not really happening to me or worry about what I am going to do. Avoidance oriented strategy. This involves denying or minimizing the seriousness of the situation. It also involves conscious suppression of stressful thoughts and their replacement by self protective thoughts. Examples of this are watching TV, phoning up a friend, or trying to be with other people. Stress management techniques. Stress is a silent killer. It is estimated to play a significant role in the physical illness and disease. Hypertension, heart disease, ulcer, diabetes, and even cancer are linked to stress. Due to lifestyle changes, stress is on the increase. Therefore, schools and institutions, offices, and communities are concerned about knowing techniques to manage stress. Some of these techniques are relaxation techniques. It is an active skill that reduces symptoms of stress and decreases the incidence of illness such as high BP, heart disease. Usually, relaxation starts from the lower part of the body and progresses up or to the facial muscles in such a way that the whole body is relaxed. Deep breathing is also used with muscle relaxation to calm the mind and relax the body. Meditation procedures. The yogic method of meditation considers and consists of a sequence of learned techniques for refocusing our attention that brings about an altered state of consciousness. It involves such a thorough concentration that the meditator becomes unaware of any outside stimulation and reaches a different state of consciousness. Biofeedback. It is a procedure to monitor and reduce the psychological aspects of stress by providing feedback about current psychological activity and is often accompanied by relaxation training. Biofeedback training involves three stages: developing an awareness of a particular psychological response and learning ways to control that psychological response in quiet conditions, and transferring the control into conditions of everyday life. Creative visualization. It is an effective technique for dealing with stress. Creative visualization is a subjective experience that uses imaginary and imagination. Before visualizing, one must set himself or herself in a realistic goal, and it helps to build confidence. It is easier to visualize one's mind is quiet if one's mind is quiet, body is relaxed, and eyes are closed. This reduces the risk of interference from unbidden thoughts and provides the creative energy needed for turning imagination scene into reality. Cognitive behavioral techniques. These techniques aim to inoculate people against stress. Stress inoculation training is one effective method developed by Mechanobeam. The essence of this approach is to replace negative and irrational thoughts with positive and rational ones. There are three main phases in this: assessment, stress reduction techniques, and application and follow through. Assessment involves discussion and discussing the nature of the problem and seeing it from the viewpoint of a person or client. Stress reduction technique involves learning the techniques of stress reduction such as relaxation and self instruction. Exercise. Exercise can provide an active outlet for the psychological arousal experienced in the response to stress. Regular exercises improve the efficiency of heart, enhances the functioning of lungs, maintains good circulation, lower blood pressure, reduces fat in the blood, and improves body's immune system. Swimming, walking, running, cycling, skipping, etc. help reduce stress. One must practice these exercises at least 4 times a week for 30 minutes each time. Promoting positive health and well being. Stress resistance personality. Recent studies by Kosoba have shown that people have with high levels of stress but low levels of illness share three characteristics which are referred to as the personality traits of hardiness. It consists of the three C's, that is, commitment, control, and challenge. Hardiness is a set of beliefs about oneself, the world, and how they interact. It takes shape as a sense of personal commitment to what you are doing, a sense of control over your life, and a feeling of challenge. Stress resistant personalities have control, which is a sense of purpose and direction in life. Commitment to work, family, hobbies, and social life, and challenge, that is, they see changes in life as normal and positive rather than as a threat. Everyone does not have these characteristics. Many of us have to relearn specific life skills in areas such as rational thinking and assertiveness to equip ourselves better to cope up with demands of everyday life. Life skills. Life skills are abilities for adaptive, positive behavioral that enable individuals to deal effectively with the demands and challenges of everyday life. There are many factors and dimensions of life skill: assertiveness, time management, rational thinking, improving relationships, self care, overcoming unhelpful habits, etc. Also, diet and exercise also play a major role in life skills.